What is Prime with the Prime Minister of India as President Donald Trump talks tough on tariffs? Could a "you charge us, we charge you" announcement come any minute from the Oval Office? We are watching live. And look at this, a blast blowing out windows. It sent shopping mall customers running for cover, not only in the ground, but also on the inside where things shook. Many deaths to talk about, many injuries. Gas is likely the culprit there. We're doubling down on that one. Plus, an Afghan asylum seeker in Munich, Germany, the suspect, #1 in a car attack. Dozens hurt. This hour, we can tell you children are among those hurt. German officials saying they want fast accountability. And a former wrestling executive getting ready to strong-arm the Department of Education while the man critical of vaccines takes the health helm. And then look at this, a cold water chomp right about now. That's a kayaker, that's a whale, and one hell of a tale. I'm Reed Cowan. This is CBS News 24/7. Let's go. Okay, but right off the top, President Donald Trump getting into it with India. That nation's prime minister meeting with the president on a day when Donald Trump is expected to talk tough on tariffs. CBS News senior White House reporter Weijia Jiang live at the White House where those high-level talks are developing right now. Weijia, we can expect that president to sign this global tariff order. What does it mean? What does it specifically spell out?
Well, the administration has been very scant on providing any kind of details for this announcement. We don't even know that it is exactly an executive order or an executive memorandum and what kind of force it will have behind it. But of course, the president tweeted today that 3 great weeks, perhaps the best ever, but today is the big one, reciprocal tariffs. And he has said things like, if you're going to charge us, we're going to charge you. So this is going to apply, he makes it sound like, to every country that has a fee on U.S. exports. The president saying that he's just going to slap on the same amount, a reciprocal tariff. So what we're waiting to hear, Reed, from the president is any kind of timetable for when those tariffs might be implemented, if it's going to be staggered, if all countries are going to be hit at once, which countries will come first if the answer to that is no. And also, you know, the economic impact of this. His advisors have been saying all morning in various interviews that they don't think this is going to have an effect on prices, but of course many economists disagree.
Is there a particular pain point where India is concerned, because all of this is anticipated to be timed with the reality that India's prime minister is meeting there at the White House?
And India is one of the U.S.'s greatest trading partners. The problem here, Reed, is that there is a trade surplus of about $50 billion in India's favor. And the president has already talked about his dislike of any trade surplus, especially one that is that big. So what that means is that India is shipping more product to the U.S. than U.S. is shipping out, and he wants to shrink that deficit. But this is not a new issue between the U.S. and India. In fact, the president has nicknamed the prime minister the tariff king. And in response to that, over the past several years, Modi has taken steps to try to at least show that he's trying to respond to that by buying more American products, by lowering the tariffs on some U.S. goods like Harley Davidson's, for example, bringing the rate down from 50 to 40%. And he also took off some tariffs that were previously implemented on U.S. goods on things like almonds, apples, and chickpeas. So he has made some progress, but certainly not enough, if you ask President Trump. And so that might make things a little bit awkward, because India might want some sort of exemption from this global tariff announcement, and it doesn't sound like the president is going to be willing to do that.
He also has a busy schedule today. We understand that he will attend the swearing in of now Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Tell us a little bit about what you expect from that moment.
Well, you know, these two have really forged a close relationship ever since RFK Jr. endorsed President Trump during the campaign. And so I think that they will likely embrace. The president has been doing that with all of his nominees that he has seen. I was just in the Oval Office yesterday when he swore in Tulsi Gabbard for Director of National Intelligence, and it is very warm. Of course, these are people that he handpicks, so we expect, it will be a very intimate reception for the new Secretary of Health and Human Services. As far as what he's going to be tasked with, they've been kind of vague, talking around each other because, of course, Kennedy Jr. has made some bold claims about his vision for how to, quote, make America healthy again. But I don't think there's any doubt that one thing we're watching, Reed, is whether or not the secretary, along with DOJ, guts HHS and gets rid of, tens of thousands of employees. We already know that they've canceled several contracts with the research branch of HHS, which impacts a lot of people. And so we'll be keeping a close eye on whether that department shrinks or not, Reed.
Weijia Jiang, looks like you got a little bit of a break from snowfall there at the White House, but no break from headlines. Thank you so much. Always great to talk to you on CBS News 24/7. So key cabinet confirmation votes command our cameras to Congress at this hour. You just heard Weijia talking about RFK Jr. About 90 minutes ago, senators voted along party lines to confirm RFK Jr. to get the keys to that Health and Human Services Secretary's office. Also today, a hearing for the Senate Education Committee. Just a committee right now, not the full Senate, but they are really wrestling with former wrestling executive tasked to run the Department of Education. Her name, if you haven't heard it, is Linda McMahon. Here's what she had to say to senators in her opening comments in an environment where, think about this, President Donald Trump says he wants to, quote, close the Department of Education. Listen.
I would also like to thank President Trump for his confidence in me to lead a department whose mission and authority were a special focus of his campaign. He pledged to make American education the best in the world, return education to the states where it belongs, and free American students from the education bureaucracy through school choice. November proved that Americans overwhelmingly support the president's vision, and I am ready to enact it.
So what does it all mean? Well, already some pretty strong opposition to McMahon could sort of signal what at least Democratic leaders think her leadership would equal. Here's Democratic Senator Chris Murphy, who says he knows what Trump and McMahon's strategy is for our kids. Listen.
The agenda is not to empower teachers and administrators because, in fact, they are planning to micromanage our teachers and administrators. You heard Linda McMahon say that today. The real agenda is to ship our schools off to Wall Street and whoever is willing to pay the highest price. Investors that will not care about our kids writ large, will definitely not care about the most vulnerable kids who need a little bit extra in order to make sure that they have a shot. All they will care about is profit. All they will care about is seeing our kids as pawns in order to make more money for themselves. So I'm really thrilled to be here with all of you today. I'm voting hell no on Linda McMahon.
So picture of the opposition there, but will it really amount to much? Let's go live to Torian Small on Capitol Hill. Torian, the president says Linda McMahon needs to, quote, work herself out of a job and close the Department of Education. So I've got to ask this question on behalf of millions of parents who have school-age kids who are in classrooms right now across the country. What does the president mean by that?
Well, exactly as he said, the president in a press conference yesterday called the Department of Education a con job, decrying the fact that the U.S. is lagging behind other countries in academic achievement and putting the blame solely at the feet of that department, although it's a bit more complicated than to just say that this is a federal issue. He's long said and campaigned on the fact that he believes that the Department of Education should be shuttered. It's unclear if he has the legality as president to unilaterally close these departments that have long been established. It's unclear if he would have to seek approval through Congress in order for that to happen. It's likely it will be litigated. But as it relates to his pick to lead the Department of Education, in his words, he said the best way she could run this job is if she immediately fires herself and closes the department. Linda McMahon appears to be in line with the president's thinking thinking on that. She's a long supporter of the president. She's a top donator. She was a part of his transition team, was previously an administrator for his small business administration under his first term. She said that she thinks bureaucracy has long failed the Department of Education, and she wants to see it return to the states.
So let's talk about Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s confirmation. Health and Human Services Secretary job now his. He's about to be sworn in there at the White House. Just as he did by giving a thumbs down to Tulsi Gabbard, Republican Senator Mitch McConnell was a no-go for RFK Jr.
Yeah, 3 controversial picks that McConnell broke with the party to unsuccessfully block their confirmations. The reason why he decided ultimately against voting to confirm Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is because he's a survivor of polio, and it didn't sit well with him that he, being Kennedy, associated himself with people who sought to get the FDA to reverse the safe finding of the vaccine. He said that vaccines in general he being Kennedy, or McConnell said that vaccines in general, he's seen firsthand the benefits, the efficacy of this medicine for the American people, and it gave him pause that Kennedy has been associated with anti-vax sentiments, has been a spreader of misinformation when it comes to the American healthcare system and the pharmaceutical industry. Democrats are at an interesting fork in the road, considering there are 2 other Republicans who they've leaned on to try to block these confirmations. Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins have twice now decided to vote for both Gabbard and Robert F. Kennedy. Kash Patel, Trump's pick to lead the FBI, is up next, and so far I'm not seeing any reservations from them, so it appears that the numbers could be in his favor as well.
Torian Small keeping track of it all. Thank you so much. Good to talk to you today. When we come back, we're going to dive more into what reciprocal tariffs are. Boil it to the bones. It's basically a message to NATO nations and other nations that do trade with the United States. You tariff us, we'll tariff you right back. How deep will this go? We have crews all over Washington, D.C. asking those very questions. You're watching CBS News 24/7, streaming coast to coast and worldwide. We're watching these monitors for breaking news. We'll be back after the break. Well, you see the for sale sign there in that monitor. Good news if you want to play the real estate game. For a 4th week, mortgage rates ticking down just slightly, not a lot, but still a 2025 low. The average rate for a 30-year loan is at 6.87. That's down from 6.89 last week, according to Freddie Mac. President Donald Trump says he's going to announce reciprocal tariffs on every country who trades with the United States. In his words, they charge us, we charge them right back. Well, that announcement set to come right before the president meets with the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, a leader that Trump has famously called the tariff king. CBS News Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady joining us live. Kelly, let's start there with reciprocal tariffs. Is it that simple to just say, hey, you charge us, we're going to charge you the same?
Well, yes, they can certainly institute it that way. It's basically a type of retaliatory tariff. You know, let's say that you're charging me to import my goods to your country. Well, I am going to do the same thing. And I say reciprocal is a type of retaliatory because the extent of the tariff, let's say it's 10%, we're going to do a 10% tariff back. So that's where the reciprocal aspect comes in. This is really going to impact developing nations. So some of the countries that put a tax on U.S. goods that are imported to their country are India, Brazil, Vietnam, Thailand, also a number of African nations as well. And the idea is that they want to try and protect and develop domestic industries. So they make those goods coming from the U.S. more expensive to buy. So this is going to be really interesting. As you mentioned, President Trump is going to meet with the Prime Minister from India right after this. So I think the timing of it is likely intentional because, of course, we also do know that President Trump has welded these tariffs as a negotiation tool.
Well, let's talk about India. Let's really drill down. What does the United States get over the borders and across the seas from India by way of imports? What do we get here?
So here we get things like pearls and jewelry, pharmaceuticals, textiles, spices as well. In 2023, we imported over $80 billion worth of goods from India into the U.S. That compares to what we exported to them, which was more in the realm of the $40 billion. So that created what's called a trade deficit. When you buy more goods than you are selling to that country. And that's another reason that President Trump has wanted to weld these tariffs to make that deficit smaller.
Okay, so let's talk about the new data on inflation because, we can talk about these international issues and the trade, but I think a lot of people are just wanting to know when are the prices going to go down at the grocery store and at the pump. When we talk about the producer price index report, what do we learn and how does that really affect people every day going to the store?
So the producer price index, it measures the cost that these companies have to pay to produce the goods that then you and I go buy at the grocery store, at the retail store. And so when producer prices go up, they often trickle down to consumer prices. And so this month, we saw the producer price index tick up by 0.4%. And then on an annual basis, it was 3.5%. Remember, we're trying to get to that 2% annual mark. So that is a big difference. And a big driver of that increase was diesel. And I always say that is the canary in the coal mine when it comes to inflation because diesel goes into so much of products as well as transport of products, right? Trucks run on diesel. When that costs more to get to the grocery store and we have to pay more. So certainly, Reed, wasn't a good reading today.
Well, with mortgage rates ticking down just a teeny tiny bit, does that mean, Kelly O'Grady, that you are going to be logging on to Zillow along with me a little bit more these days?
I'm always on Zillow.
Okay, Kelly O'Grady, thank you so much for talking to us. Let's move on the map now to the state of California. Well, there's a huge river in the sky, an atmospheric river, and the floods are the reality there. Look at this. You can see right there the floodwaters just across the street from where we took that video. Sheriff's deputies were going door to door telling people to evacuate. This is just outside of San Francisco, California. We also have some images that come to us from the California Highway Patrol, but first of all, we're going to be talking about the San Francisco Bay Area, and you can see it is downright soupy there. That is the Golden Gate Bridge that connects the city of San Francisco to Marin County, if you know that area, Sausalito, Tiburon, San Rafael, and then wine country north from there. So all the way north to south. A lot of people in Northern California have really felt the impacts there on the west coast of that atmospheric river. But it is also dangerous further south. The California Highway Patrol, well, they just sent us this video right there. This is the result. Hey, all the rain comes down, loosens up the hillsides, and down the hillsides come. This photo came to us just moments ago, and it really shows you the impact. Just the rain soaks the ground gives way, and those massive rocks come tumbling down on the side of the roadway. Authorities there warning people exercise extreme caution while driving through that area. So let's talk about Los Angeles, because the rains also came down there, especially in those wildfire-ravaged areas of Los Angeles County where people who ran from the fire now are running from flood evacuation orders at this hour. In fact, you see that leaders in Los Angeles County, especially in this Altadena foothills area, telling people to get out if they feel they're at risk of mudslides and debris flows, and they are. And that's where we find CBS News Los Angeles' Rick Montanez. Rick, it's pretty soupy down there where you are, and I can also see some barriers there that keep some of those runoff from going down in the culvert there behind you.
Yeah, so Reed, we are in an area that's under an evacuation warning right now. The concrete barriers you see off to our side here, those are right off Lake Avenue, which is one of the main routes here in Altadena. So they're trying to keep water from going down that way. That is where a lot of the emergency crews, the construction crews that have been coming through here, trying to clear debris from these homes, trying to work through fixing a lot of the utilities and things like that that have been damaged from the fire. They've been using that road to get up here. News crews as well. So we've seen plenty of rain come down. It's picked up quite a bit in the last, I would say, 10 minutes. We had a pretty good break in the last hour and a half, but more heavier rain is in the forecast, and that is where the concern is for those charred hillsides you see behind us, that they could come down if they get too saturated, because there's nothing really holding them up, and they're very unstable right now.
Yeah, we can see it's just a soggy mess there, and our thoughts with so many people in Southern California. It's like they literally cannot catch a break. So for those people who end up evacuated, where do they go? Is it just repeating the same rescue efforts that happened during the fire, or are there new places that people can go?
You know, I think it's kind of the good that comes with the bad already, Reed, because there aren't many people who are living in these communities because again, utilities have still been down. So a lot of homeowners have to, if their homes survive the fires, they still have to clean up the inside because so many of the homes were damaged by smoke and soot. So a lot of people really aren't living up here, but we have been hearing that some of the evacuation warnings are extending out to areas that are not in the burn scar. So that is where then emergency crews would create these shelters, set up something new, something that they already have in place that we've seen happen time and time again. So they're certainly prepared for something like that to happen. But in these burn scar areas, very few people actually living in their homes if they're still standing. But again, they're hoping to keep their homes because they survived the fire. Hopefully they survive these storms.
My goodness. And Rick, I just have to ask you, you know, you have a burned home there behind you. There's been a lot of talk about the environmental impacts, the toxins in what is left over from a house fire, be it a car that burned, a gas tank that burned, a car battery that exploded. Talk to us about the risk when the rains come down, about the runoff relative to the toxins that are in these burned out homes.
So the EPA and the Army Corps of Engineers have gone through phases of the cleanup. Phase 1, which they are largely done with, is the removal of hazardous waste. Those are batteries, propane tanks, things like that you were mentioning. And then phase 2 is the general debris, which is what they've started this week. Let's see if we can show you here for a second. If my photographer, Ernie Fuentes, can take us down here on the ground. You see a lot of the sandbags and then this piping, this green piping, that has been set out to absorb a lot of the toxins that are in the ash that are coming with the runoff. So they know that some of it's probably going to be sent down the road in this rain runoff because enough rain is coming down. But certainly they're doing what they can to try and mitigate that with these steps. And they are telling people here, don't touch these, don't move them. The EPA will come in here, environmental crews will come in here to remove those and properly dispose of them once we're done with these storms.
CBS News Los Angeles, and your reporting, be it from fire or floods, literally credited with saving lives and helping millions of Californians who literally ran from fire and now flood. Thank you to you, Reg. Thank you to your photographer, Ernie, for standing out in the rain. Please send our gratitude to your entire team down there at CBS News Los Angeles. Epic reporting.
I appreciate you, Reed.
Such
Thanks.
important reporting. Great to see you, friend. So, you know, folks in LA County hoping that they won't see a repeat of this after the rains clear. This was how it looked, and you probably remember this. This is Montecito in January of 2018. That's up north of LA in Santa Barbara County. Winter storms then, and you see the mud flows, the debris right there, hillsides of many, many mountain ranges in that area. It's because damage from the Thompson fire burned more than 281,000 acres, and what happens is it just loosens up the ground. So after those slides, we can tell you 23 people lost their lives, more than 100 homes were destroyed. So it's a very real risk. So let's bring in meteorologist Jessica Birch, because there is a science to what happens when fire comes in, dries things out, eats up the hillside. Explain that for us, Jess.
Well, the other thing to mention with that too is the rainfall rates, right? The big concern right now, I'm actually going to head over here so you can see this atmospheric river. If the rainfall rates stay consistent, and they are expected to see anywhere up to around 6 inches of rain, of course, it's debris flow and mudslides is the #1 concern for our community members down there. And we continue to keep a close eye on them as this atmospheric river really unfurls its way, not only in Southern California, but stretching its way up into the Bay Area, where they're expected to see about 4 inches of rain, all the way over into the Sierra too, and then stretched off into the Rockies throughout the next 48 hours as this area of low pressure starts to decay inland. Now take a look behind me. It's Los Angeles that we're keeping a close eye on right now, because just from a month ago when these fires burned, Reed mentioned it perfectly, it loosens up that soil. These mudslides are potentially possible just within the next day, the next 24 hours. We're seeing some of the strongest winds, strongest rains all throughout these communities in areas that haven't even seen a lot of rain since past the past year. I mean, we're talking about last April, May, as the last substantial rain that Los Angeles and those higher hills have seen. So as we take a look at those burn scar areas, there's flood watches in effect right now, widespread throughout Southern California. And of course, we monitor those closely. This map will actually update in live time with those flood warnings. If we do see any, it'll highlight in red. And that's what we're concerned right now as meteorologists as we head into the next couple hours, watching these rainfall rates stay consistent, anywhere up to around 1/4 of an inch an hour. That could cause a lot of issues with the debris flow and, of course, that damaging flooding as well. So we keep a close eye on that map. We keep a close eye on those rain conditions as we head into the next 24 hours. But it definitely causes a lot of issues out there when you're seeing as much as we see in such a little packed amount of time.
It's really fascinating to me and super important to highlight that meteorology, well reported, literally can save lives. Give people advance notice. Jess, thank you so much for that. When we come back, we are watching the moves of Pete Hegseth overseas. There are reports today that he is walking back words that were widely reported yesterday relative to Ukraine and whether Ukraine would have to just give up some territory to Russia. What Pete Hegseth had to say when we come back. Want you to see this. Video to our monitors shows the moment. And there it is, that a blast blew out the windows at a Taiwan shopping mall. Wow. 4 dead. Dozens injured in what is suspected to be a gas explosion. This is, by the way, at a department store about 100 miles southwest of Taipei. From the outside view, we can go inside. Watch this. You see the shaking there? That's the cause. The gas caused it, but that is the response to what caused that explosion. Things just moving. Almost looks like earthquake video. There it is again. Sent a lot of people running on the inside. We're also learning construction was happening on the inside of that shopping mall when this happened, bad enough to shake things around. Then we can see the aftermath from yet another vantage point. Look at that. That is drone video that just shows that almost 360-degree view of the damage. People were on the inside of this when that construction work appeared to trigger a gas explosion. That's what it looked like down on the ground. All of that debris raining down on the ground there in Taiwan. Crazy. 4 killed at least. The death toll could go up, we understand, in the coming hours. Our monitors now take us to Munich, Germany, where a driver plowed a car into a crowd, injuring dozens. This is the aftermath there. Officials say the entire community is deeply shocked, especially with this reporting. Many of those hurt on the ground are children. So let's go live to CBS News White House reporter Olivia Rinaldi. You are there at the scene for us. What can you tell us? We see the police tape there. What about the investigation? Who do they think did this?
Yeah, Reed, it's not the story we thought we were going to cover today in Munich. We're here for the Munich Security Conference, but this morning on this street behind me, a small Mini Cooper, white Mini Cooper, plowed into groups of people. 28 were injured, as you mentioned. Many of them were children. Officials also tell us that some of them have life-threatening injuries, some of the people who were injured today. We just saw a short while ago officials come by and take away that Mini Cooper that was still here hours after this suspected attack. The windshield was completely destroyed. The front bumper of the car completely, torn up. And so they took that away. Then we also saw firefighters spray down the street here. And we see a huge police presence right now, as it looks like there are some people who are talking with reporters, delivering flowers here, really holding somewhat of a memorial for what happened earlier today. We do know that there is someone in custody. He's a 24-year-old Afghan national who was reportedly seeking asylum here in Germany. And he was also known to officials. Officials tell us that he was someone who had a prior history of theft and drug use. And that's how they knew who he was. He is now in custody, and this investigation is still underway as we're still in the very hours after this had occurred.
Anybody using the word terror attack when they look at the scene there behind you overseas, and you get a sense that there could be the possibility that this was a message sent, because we know you were originally sent there to cover the trip of Vice President J.D. Vance.
It's a little too soon to tell. We do know that terror police are investigating what happened here. But look, Reed, car attacks in Germany are not exactly rare. We know we covered back in December that there was a car attack at a Christmas market where someone had plowed through, and that ended up being an instance of terrorism. 5 people were killed and hundreds other injured in that sort of attack. So they're still in the very early hours of that investigation. But also, as you mentioned, the Munich Security Conference is happening just a mile down the street. That's a huge event that's drawing not only a lot of world leaders here, but also a lot of security presence, a lot of police. We have Secret Service. Vice President J.D. Vance landed here earlier today. I was with him on a tour of Dachau concentration camp memorial site, where there were countless numbers of Secret Service officials there. Only one of the delegations here, and there are hundreds of countries that are attending this. So this is a city that is already locked down, but surely going to be locked down even further, given what occurred on this street here today.
We're seeing video on the screen of J.D. Vance's stop right there where you are. But did you have a chance to ask him if he had any reaction to what played out at this now crime scene behind you?
So he didn't come here behind me today, but he did go to Dachau concentration memorial site, and there he met with a Holocaust survivor and really walked through the former concentration camp and talked about what his experience was like there with this Holocaust survivor. And at the end of it, he talked about what an impact that visit had on him. And I did ask Vice President Vance there if that impact that he had in touring this concentration camp memorial site today made him think differently about the war in Ukraine and what's happening between Israel and Gaza. He did not reply to that, but the overarching important theme of today was he said that he doesn't want to see more countless lives lost. And this comes, as we know, tomorrow he's going to have that very critical meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, where the topic of ending that nearly 3-year-long war is going to be top of mind. We know that President Trump already spoke with President Putin of Russia and Zelensky on Wednesday. The timing of this and this meeting today, not coincidental, or this meeting tomorrow rather, not coincidental at all. And it's surely going to be something that comes up.
Well, we know it wasn't exactly what you came to cover, but we are grateful that you can be a touchstone to that violence that played out there in that car attack. Our thoughts with so many people, not the least of which the children who are injured and recovering. Thank you so much for that. All right, so let's continue this conversation about President Donald Trump's people that he's sending to international areas. Step up. That's the message of Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth to NATO leaders when it comes to defending their own nation. So let's listen to his comments from the NATO defense meeting in Brussels earlier today.
Leaders of our European allies should take primary responsibility for defense of the continent, which means security ownership by all allies, guided by a clear understanding of strategic realities, and it's an imperative given the strategic realities that we face. And that begins with increasing defense spending. 2% is a start, as President Trump has said, but it's not enough. Nor is 3%, nor is 4%, more like 5%. Real investment, real urgency. There is no replacement for hard power.
Also, Pete Hegseth had some things to talk about relative to Russia's war in Ukraine. He gave world leaders an idea of the U.S. position where that war is concerned. Hegseth sort of seemed to walk back some comments made yesterday that Ukraine should maybe think about giving up on regaining territory taken by Russia. Listen to this moment when a reporter pressed him in on that point in that headline from yesterday.
There's a reason why negotiations are happening right now, just a few weeks after President Trump was sworn in as President of the United States. Vladimir Putin responds to strength in his conversations with Vladimir Putin and Zelensky. What he decides to allow or not allow is at the purview of the leader of the free world, of President Trump. So I'm not going to stand at this podium and declare what President Trump will do or won't do, what will be in or what will be out, what concessions will be made or what concessions are not made.
So it's been a long and deadly war. We know this. The Kremlin launched that full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. And look at that. Russia now controls around 20% of Ukraine's territory, including key regions in the south and east, including Crimea, illegally seized, by the way, by Russia in 2014. Regaining Crimea has been a fundamental goal of Ukraine since the war began in 2022. What happens in those conversations with Pete Hegseth and other leaders from the Trump administration, not the least of which Marco Rubio, will write history on the globe. When we come back, also another chapter in President Donald Trump's writing of history, and that is using tariffs to try to strong-arm better deals with international forces. CBS News 24/7 digging down on reciprocal tariffs and an announcement that could come at any minute when we come back. Welcome back to CBS News 24/7. We continue watching President Donald Trump because he says he's going to announce reciprocal tariffs on every country with duties placed on the United States. In his words, if they charge us, we'll charge them. That announcement is set to come right before a meeting between President Trump and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, a leader that Trump calls the tariff king. By the way, the U.S. is India's largest trade partner, but the U.S. imports far more goods from India than the other way around. And that's what we just heard as a trade deficit. In 2024, U.S. exports to India totaled about $41 billion. Imports from India totaled $87 billion. So you do the math, the trade deficit stands at $45 billion headline-making dollars. President Trump says that's in India's favor. So let's bring in Megan Lenhart, Barron's senior economics writer. Megan, so what goods do we exchange specifically with India? Because really it's going to come down to what we get as the consumer and the talks between President Donald Trump and India and other nations.
It's absolutely true. This is really going to come down to the fine details. And of course, we are still waiting on this announcement. But when it comes to India, I think we actually get a wide array of different products. I mean, everything from textiles to pharmaceuticals, chemicals, even some things like manufacturing equipment and, the sort of heavier manufacturing pull from India. So this could affect a wide range of sectors in the U.S. And of course, we have been talking through the idea that tariffs could potentially be inflationary depending on how they're implemented and what exactly is on the table when it comes to these kind of deals. But it is one of those things that consumers do need to be keeping this in mind. It is something where we're already unfortunately seeing higher prices, both, in terms of the grocery store as well as at the pump. And this is going to make a big difference in the months to come.
So when we talk about those reciprocal tariffs and you boil it to the bones, we've said this before, you tariff us, we'll tariff you right back. How will that change this headline-making trade deficit between the United States and India? Because it is in the tens of billions of dollars. But how does a reciprocal tariff sort of balance those books, or does it?
It can balance the books, of course, but it is, again, devil's in the details when it comes down to these particular trade deals. In this case, currently we have about a weighted average of 3%, and India's imports, obviously, exports to India have, somewhere in the 9.5% range. And so obviously there does need to be a little bit of level setting, and that's what the Trump administration is really hoping for. And of course, the revenues that could be generated from this in order to offset things like those tax cuts and other, policy implementations that the Trump administration is hoping to do. But when it comes to, the actual revenues that are being generated from this, that really depends. I mean, certainly, when you do the broad math on some of this, the numbers can look very big, but what ends up happening in practicality is that consumer habits change, business habits change. And so many times the sort of estimated value of some of these tariffs in practicality is a lot less than previously expected.
Well, we know that President Trump ran on the promise that our domestic economic issues would be solved. He used to say through that magical word of tariffs. But we have people about to gas up today or about to go to the grocery store to fill a bag. How can these reciprocal tariffs really influence what we pay at that point of sale?
Well, unfortunately, economists have said, time and time again that tariffs do end up being a bit of a short-term and potentially long-term effect on things like inflation. And obviously that affects price levels that we see on the consumer level. And so we did actually see in January, inflation was a lot hotter than we expected it to be, and was actually a pretty bad sign for folks, looking to cut back a little bit on their grocery budget or, obviously, their transportation costs when it comes to gas and things like that. So we're already facing a little bit of a higher level than we were, say, mid last year. And obviously that does make a difference. Now, it's nowhere near what it was at the peak in 2022, for example. We're much, much cooler when it comes to inflation at this point. But obviously, when you do start tacking on tariffs, which essentially are levies or taxes, then that does end up making a difference because companies are getting those inputs, they're, applying them to their operating costs, and then they can pass along those higher operating costs to consumers in the form of higher priced goods.
Right, and the production index also up. Let's switch gears, but keep it down sort of where us regular people are, people who are doing those point of sale purchases. You have a great article today for Barron's. Holiday shopping. The afterglow looks to be wearing off for a lot of Americans because we're getting that first bill. Earlier on, right before the Christmas, the Hanukkah, all of the holidays, we said, look, people are spending more, they're charging more because consumer confidence appeared to be up given the election. But now you're saying that people are starting to feel that pinch and that burn a little bit?
What we've been seeing, actually, and this goes beyond just the holiday season. This started in 2023. It's obviously been a trend into 2024, and it seems like it'll probably be with us in 2025, is the idea that delinquency rates have been on the rise. And it was interesting because during the pandemic, when we did get those government stimulus checks, when there was a lot of, free money, if you will, floating around the economy, we saw delinquency rates and debt go way down. People were paying down their debt. They were paying off their credit cards. They were doing all the right things, which is really good news. It makes everything a little bit stronger and a little bit more resilient when the unfortunate, obviously other shoe hits the floor, if you will. But what we're seeing now is because savings are a little bit less, because people are continuing to spend, those delinquency rates have risen above pre-pandemic levels. And that is a little worrying, but it is good news to some extent that even though we had an incredibly robust holiday season, the overall total debt was pretty good and delinquencies were okay.
All right, informing that conversation when you go for a date. You paying your bills? Thank you so much for having that conversation with us today. Hey, when we come back, we have video you have got to see. A kayaker in some pretty cold water and a very hungry whale. Some people here in the newsroom said, that's Pinocchio. We'll be right back. This you got to see. Video to our monitors from off the coast of Chile. This is a kayaker meeting a whale, and not in the way you want to meet a whale. A kayaker chomped, in fact, right there in the water by the whale. In fact, he says he thought he was dead after that humpback whale nearly swallowed him. The young man's dad capturing it all on his phone. Here's the moment. There's the chomp. Well, his dad was saying, stay calm in the moment, like a dad does. Seconds later, that humpback whale, well, the humpback whale stayed calm enough to open its jaws and let the kayaker go. Thank goodness he's okay. He made it back to shore unharmed. Well, live pictures right now of the Sierra at Tahoe, and check that out. That is a frigid picture there. Jessica Birch knows that area well, Jess. Skiers rejoicing, but I don't know.
They'll rejoice this weekend once that all comes to an end because they're dealing with gusty conditions right now on top of all of that snow. At the exact same time, the Bay Area all the way down to Los Angeles is dealing with this strong and powerful atmospheric river, bringing with it heavy rain, snow, and of course the winds too. That'll continue to decay inland as we head into the next 48 hours, bringing snow to the Rockies and all the way up into the Cascades too. But take a look behind me. We start off with that snow over into Tahoe. It's going to be a pretty impressive system. I mean, Donner Pass, one of the common routes to get over to Truckee and North Lake Tahoe, it's going to be snowed in for a while. Chain requirements definitely in effect with anywhere up to around 6 feet of snow from this system. You take a look at the rest of those coastal areas like San Francisco all the way down into San Diego, either dealing with flood watches or warnings right now. And of course, that causes a lot of issues for our friends all the way down into Los Angeles near those burn scars. We continue to monitor this closely, especially with the rain rates as fast as they are. We're going to keep a close eye on those burn scars when it comes to mudslides and, of course, debris flow. Reed?
All right, Jess, from the white stuff at Sierra Tahoe to the White House, CBS News 24/7 watching some big developments. Of course, the much talked about move by President Donald Trump relative to what he calls reciprocal tariffs. And also, we are watching for the swearing in of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as Health and Human Services Secretary. A lot of headlines still to come out of the White House today, not the least of which what happens between President Donald Trump and the Prime Minister of India. The news continues.